how did you compete with Nicholas and Sneed? I said, you're 5'7". Nicholas is probably 4 inches taller than you, and stature massive.
Yeah.
Sneed, last night you said was the ultimate in athlete. How did you compete? You were, and he went, for fitness and this, that, and the other. And I said about diet, and he just went, 2 meals a day. That's all you need. 2 meals a day. You don't need more than 2 meals a day. That's what he told me.
When you're 5 foot something and slender built, you probably get away with it, if that makes sense.
2 meals a day.
Yeah.
And he said, you Brits eat too much fried egg and bacon. He said, so you're fat. He said, so. And I was just about to say, he just went, he said, let me tell you something. I'm going to give you some advice. He kept saying to me. Let me give you some advice.
Yes, please.
And I was sat there going, brilliant. I said, I'll never forget this. I'm sat at home, lockdown, and Gary Player's rang me home.
I could say you get a phone call off, and it's just what happens to be Gary Player, just gently on the phone giving you a buzz.
Can't believe it.
Yeah,
it's just nuts. Completely nuts, but,
I can't imagine when you started this a couple of weeks ago that you were, kind of week 4 of lockdown, and all of a sudden your phone goes at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and it's Gary Player giving you a buzz.
It's mad, isn't it? I don't know. I reckon I've probably done. I reckon I've done 30 now. I reckon I've done 30 people, and there's probably loads more that I'd love to speak to, even outside golf.
Yeah.
I just think there must be some really interesting people. There's a couple of people who have tried and I haven't got hold of yet for whatever reason, but I might keep trying.
But, there were like the Dave Alford one, his background and coming into golf and stuff like that. Yeah, he's got so many skills and things that he knows from other sports.
I spoke to him again last week, and he said he'd come on again. He said he'd come on again. Mate. I spoke to him last week. I spoke to Dave Alred last week, and he said he'd do it again. He just wanted to know what sort of topic I wanted to talk about, and then we could agree to do it again. But brilliant, absolutely brilliant. David always amazing. They're all different. They've all been great in different ways. It's just different because they've all got different perspectives or look at it in different ways. The only thing that I do conclude is that a lot of the concepts from a science perspective are all the same. The only difference is each player is managed far more individually now. Far more individually. And when you look at when you look at the way the golf swing is and the person is, it has to be individualized for them physically, mentally, and technically in order to be able to improve them. And I'm gonna throw something at you tonight, completely off the wall. This is right, and I don't know whether this is actually possible or not. Right, this is just in my head. So you get a golfer. You look at them physically, they have a massive imbalance, left side to right side, in strength, flexibility, the lot. But they're top 20 in the world. Do you train them? Do you train them in such a way that you strengthen up each ingredient to keep the imbalance, but make them physically stronger in the move? Bearing in mind, you could completely injure them.
Well, more importantly, rather than an injury point of view, you could completely wreck what makes them good. And I think I know you and Mark Ball spoke about Bubba the other day a little bit, and how kind of he is, if that makes sense. I think first and foremost, you always, I think in our sport, whether you're a lefty or a righty, you're always going to have some form of an imbalance, if that makes sense, left or right. I don't think if you think about, especially a pro player who might hit, I don't know, could casually hit 500 balls a day. I don't think they should do, but if you try and work on something, whether it be practice right through, you can hit that many golf balls. You're always going to have some form of imbalance. Personally and professionally, I don't think you're going to be able to undo that, if that makes sense.
No, what I'm saying is, could you train to the point where you retain the imbalance to retain the swing?
Yeah, definitely. So if you think about like unilateral training, if that makes sense, look at somebody from kind of Mike Boyle, who's an S&C coach out in the States. He's a big kind of proponent of unilateral training, so training on one side and then training on the other. So yeah, you could definitely kind of load it both from a volume and or from an actual weight point of view and maintain those kind of imbalances from that point.
Because somebody said, I think it was Dana said about one of his players that they had a big imbalance left to right based off how they played the game. Yeah. And that when their strength and conditioning program was set up, it was almost, let's say, designed to make them more symmetrical.
Yeah.
But actually making them symmetrical, they lost some of the skill because they couldn't coordinate it in the same way.
Yeah, totally. And I think what you got to remember is the sport that as a golfer, you do typically rotate one way with four. Like, yes, obviously you're going to your backswing, but you forcefully rotate one way predominantly all the time. We have this kind of from a strength and conditioning physiotherapy world. We have this big age of trying to get symmetry and get a balance between left and right side. And unfortunately, sports just aren't. If let's use other sports, for example, and say a footballer or a rugby kicker, they're always going to have one side stronger than the other side, because if they predominantly kick all the time off their right foot or left foot, there is going to be an imbalance. There is going to be a natural imbalance through from there as well. I think, yeah, you can definitely set the training up to kind of ensure that their super strengths maintain their super strength, if that being their ability as a right-handed golfer to really drive into the floor on their left foot. Then yeah, keep cracking and keep that pushing forward.
Because with some of what people say, you look at the different movements, whether it be how the left arm moves, how the right arm straightens. They're just different. They're just different moves. And a player, when I look at it, a player might be playing top draw golf using their body in a certain way, and it would be easy through training to get better for them actually to lose some of the coordination pattern that made him great.
Yeah, totally. I think you know what, from a top world-class player at the moment, that would be a great example is John Ram. I know the TPI put a fair bit out on there. You look at kind of Ram's swing, he's not got a very long backswing, has he, ultimately, down to certain key issues, or like kind of limitations that he has, but they've made that decision. Francesco Molinari is another example. You look at kind of his video from his swings from last year, where he kind of, as he comes through to impact, his left foot externally rotates. Him and his team, coaching staff, physios, S&C team, have obviously made the decision there to kind of go, well, actually, do you know what? We're not going to try and improve that range or that kind of skill or that kind of area, purely because actually we've got it to work, if that makes sense. And really, okay, yeah, he didn't have a great last kind of 6 holes at the Masters, but he's a phenomenal player because of that.
And you know what? I think that's very true. And the other thing that comes out, and I'm not, Dr. Scott Lynn touched on it last week in terms of how players create speed and power within their swing. Terry Rouse last night said there were obviously different. In his opinion, there were different ways of producing speed, whether they loaded to the right side, moved across and rotated, they loaded in the centre, or they loaded on the left, right?
Yeah.
So bearing in mind, wherever someone loads, obviously then changes how they move forward and through the ball, right? Yeah. That changes how they produce speed and power, right?
Yeah.
Which could then change everything relative to how they want to train, isn't it?
Yeah, totally. And I think the big thing there is everybody's going to have their own differences, and it's all down to no one person, no one golfer is exactly the same, whether that be limb length, torso length, arm length, how they then set up to, you know what, you could have two people that are exactly the same height, same limb lengths, but actually their setup positions, they have then different shaft lengths and how they then load the shaft to ultimately create speed. You have some players then that, again, pretty similar across the board, but they might kind of really use their legs in the golf swing or have really quick hips. And actually then again, the training methods need to be different and individualized for that player, if that makes sense. And that's the big thing.
And how would training, because obviously you work with world-class athletes in all sports across the board. How does golf training differ from other training?
So I think first and foremost, there are, as an S&C coach, you have a set of skills, if that makes sense, or kind of tools in a toolbox, if that makes sense. And all sports will have some form or components of each of those in there. And it's about the amount of them and how they're used and when they're used more than anything. So let's use a golfer for prime example. We look at the kind of research that's coming out now is a lot around kind of lower body kind of, there are certain exercises and things that are kind of key linked to club head speed, those being the ability to jump vertically, a back squat, bench press are all kind of things. So that's where we're moving towards now, predominantly with training. I know Bryson DeChambeau put a video out, I think not that long ago, I think it was last week, he did one where he's kind of talking about his muscle mass that he's increased and how it's allowing him to hit the ball even further. You can kind of look at that as a bit more of a whole body sport, whereas you might have certain sports which will be actually, well, let's look at kind of some of the endurance runners that I work with. That's going to be much more lower body training. And yes, you are going to do some heavy stuff, but again, a lot of it's going to be around kind of the plyometric and the springy kind of element and trying to make them as kind of elastic as possible so they can use the ground really well and kind of create some free energy, but moving forward. Whereas a golfer, obviously, we're looking more to be a vertical element. So again, we're going to kind of maybe include the same elements, but the exercises specifically might be different. So a golfer, we're going to do a lot more vertical jumping and rotational stuff. A runner might be more horizontal. You could then have somebody like an archer or an upper body dominant sport, which aren't really going to do any lower body stuff. They might do minimum amount just to maintain some certain strength qualities, but actually the predominance of their program is going to be all upper body stuff and actually focusing around the shoulder, the kind of scapula and the neck joint.
Because you've got quite a thorough way of profiling players, haven't you? You have a 3-hour session where you go through all the component parts of the golfer.
Yeah, totally. Because ultimately, as we've discussed, each golfer is very different, and they're all individual, if that makes sense. So, kind of spend a fair bit of time. So the kind of what we do a 3-hour kind of service, which is we spend an hour and a half with that athlete to kind of really truly understand them. Because again, everybody's individual, and also it's how, again, going back to that point of how they're trying to do it. Because I might look at one golfer and go, well, I'd really like you to have these kind of ranges, but they go, well, actually, I don't try and do that in my golf swing. Speaking with my coach, I'm trying to do that. So kind of there's a good hour and a half of assessment and kind of trying to find out what they can do, what they'd like to do, and then half an hour of kind of really understanding that and having a conversation. And then actually the last hour is actually trying to put something in process so that the athlete goes away with going, right, I know what I could do better. I know what I'm good at. And actually I've now got a plan in place, because see that quite common, and not through fault, but people trying to do things quite quickly and going, right, well, actually, let's give you a little bit of a snippet, give you the information and go away with. And good old Dr. Google is pretty awful for people being able to go on and go and find a few exercises to do, which they might be helping, but actually putting it together as a whole program, it might not be what they're trying to do, what their coach is trying to get them to do as a plan and a process moving forward.
And when you do this, what are the most common issues with golfers physically?
So I suppose it would differ. So if you're looking at kind of your typical amateur golfer, predominantly I would tend to see a little bit of stiffness through that upper back and probably through their hips. That's typically your kind of sedentary golfer who will sit a lot of time, potentially even more towards mid to later life, who have lost a little bit of range. Your typical kind of female athletes tend to come in at the opposite end of the spectrum and be a lot more mobile. So So it kind of depends on the player. And then again, you get your tour players, and some of those guys and girls come in and they're very individualized. So actually they could have all the ranges that you'd want them to potentially have and be able to move, and they just can't control it possibly, or can't do it at such a slow speed to really know where their body is in time and space. Put a club head in their hand and they can kind of do it. So again, it massively depends on the person, but as a general kind of typecast, male amateur golfers come in and they tend to be a little bit immobile. Female amateur golfers come in and they tend to not be strong enough and therefore have so much mobility they just can't control it. Now they both in their golf swing will look like they might not be mobile enough. The stiff player, the male golfer, isn't going to be able to get into shapes because they physically can't get there, whereas the junior or the female golfer can't get into those shapes because they're not strong enough to hold the club. You think about a driver club, yes, it's not very heavy, but it's a long lever with a little weight on the end. That at high velocities is hard to control, and why we see people lose posture, lose balance, not actually go into certain parts of the swing because they just can't get there, or they can't control it. They're ultimately they'll fall over.
And when I think I agree completely. And you think a lot of that is just basically how they live their life? That's just an environmental hazard.
Yeah, so I think the junior and female kind of ones and male, I think there is an element of kind of genetic makeups in there. You will obviously get some differences. Some won't fall into those generalisms. Sorry, but yeah, I think there's a lot of it. I mean, I'm doing it now. You're doing it now. We're sat down a lot. We're not as active as we used to be. We can kind of, especially for golfers. How many golfers do you know that the first thing they do, they get to the club, they walk out the car, they maybe grab a coffee and a bacon roll from the pro shop, walk to the first tee, and then spend 4 hours loosening up. It's not until they get onto the 5th hole that they can stand there and go, right, great, I can now swing the club fully. I know a couple of clients are kind of a club over in Coventry, kind of Herschel, which has got like the first 3 holes are pretty brutal. So if you do that, you can kind of wreck your card before you've even started.
Absolutely. And when I look at this, it's almost like, in golf, it's probably historic a little bit to, that's how golfers. But one of the things that comes up with most people now, Jamie Sadlowski said it to me last week, golfers are now athletes. They are not golfers. And if anybody who classes themselves as an athlete would not do that.
No, totally. And I think you see it because you look at kind of junior sport. Friends of mine who have got kind of 5, 6-year-old boys and girls that go and play football on a Saturday. What is the first thing every coach will do in every peewee football, hockey, rugby, netball, you name a sport, athletics? What's the first thing they would do is they will warm up. We see it in junior golf coaching as well, but we then get into kind of, I don't know, we turn to 14, 15, again, general window and bracket, and all of a sudden those kind of good habits go out the window, if that makes sense. And actually, if we want to swing a golf club at, I don't know, 120 mile an hour, which is what your kind of average tour player, they're spending 45 minutes before they even get out on the course and practice. Brooks Koepka last year was famous for only spending 45 minutes on the range. Today's golfer went absolutely nuts because they were like, well, how can he only spend 45 minutes on the range and putting green warming up? And it's like, hang on, he practiced this day in, day out. It was second day of a tournament. He spent an hour warming up. His body was ready to go. He just needed to groove the movement. Why spend 3 hours on a range hitting golf balls? You're going to be out on the course for 5-6 hours. You're going to be knackered.
Yeah, well, it was interesting because he might not spend very long, but Claude said that Dustin spends the longest out of anybody on tour.
Okay.
He said Dustin can go out there an hour and a half before, and he'd just be in wedge shots, and there's a certain regime. So I think that does vary massively from player to player all day.
Because certain people are going to want to do certain things, and they'll have their own routines. So kind of, I chatted to a sports site last night about routines, and certain people are in certain habits almost, if that makes sense, and will want to do certain things because that's what they know and they feel good afterwards. And it's very individual, but I think as golfers we do have a habit of spending a lot of time getting ready for something which is a long event.
Absolutely. Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I think if you look through the spectrum of players from junior golfers who just start to, you know, let's say county players who then become regional squads, who then become, you know, young pros and go on up the tree. You would imagine in most sporting circles, the the key ingredients of mobility, flexibility, etc., would actually be set up in level one. Certainly, the martial arts lads, you know, you start martial
Yeah.
arts, you probably got no mobility, flexibility, right? But as you train and train, you get better and better and better and stronger and stronger and stronger. And every, let's say, every progression and every step, you add a few more pieces into it to actually become better at that sport. In golf, what tends to happen is they start at about 16, right? So they might do a bit here and there, but nothing that's, you know, massively structured unless they end up in a regional squad or something to train. But if they don't, they get to sort of 15, 16, and then they start training. So they probably missed out against athletes in other sports on 5 to 6 years of training where they can drip feed the strength and conditioning work in so that by the time they get to that age, they can move on to the next stage, which might then
Oh,
be power.
yeah, massively. I think there's a Jan, I can't think of his surname. There's a sports scientist who does a lot of research, and he's kind of, you look at data to show kind of, especially it's mainly in kind of males, but it works in females as well, and kind of puberty. That actually athlete potential is greater if we can start somebody training at a younger age, preferably be pre-puberty. And we're talking kind of 10-year-olds. And if you look at football, again, they have the money to be able to do it, but they invest heavily at the age of under nines. You've got S&C coaches in that are kind of like masters qualified, internationally renowned, that are running junior programs. Arsenal Football Academy is a well documented and well known kind of academy for this. They've got, each age group has their own S&C coach from about the age of under 10, under 9s, I think, roughly. So you can kind of think about that to under 18. You've got 8 S&C coaches there potentially, or maybe kind of they're flicking in between. So you might have, say, 4 or 5 spread over that age group. Now, if we look at golf, you're completely on the nose there, and you get into a region. It's not until you really get into regional setups. Some counties do little bits. So I know I did a little bit with Ali at the Warwickshire Ladies County, but that was just a one-off session. We might do some more, obviously, hopefully out of lockdown. But there's only certain counties that are then investing in that, and certain coaches and clubs. And I've got a few juniors that I work with, and we've seen a massive improvement in their ability as golfers, just by giving them some basic good quality advice of warming up, moving a little bit better. Again, we can then start tapping into nutrition and hydration, and kind of looking at those key skills as well, because if we don't get those right on a sport where we're out there for 4 or 5 hours, that can make a massive difference as well.
I think nutrition and hydration is a massive topic that probably doesn't even get uncovered in golf until they get to a certain level, which is probably close to being a pro.
Yeah, I think, and especially in the UK, until you probably hit, I mean, you might have a couple of good coaches that know a little bit that might be able to do a bit, but until you hit kind of England regional setups where they get support from that point of view, I think, yeah, it's probably not even really touched, again, apart from the odd good county that might discuss it, or good
so
coach,
how
if
would
that makes
that
sense.
differ? How would that differ to other sports that you work in?
Oh, massively, and I think the warm-up example is a prime example. So first and foremost, I think education of coaches. Let's use athletics as an example. I think athletics coaches typically have better education and knowledge around those things, especially kind of power coaches. So if you're talking to a sprint, 100-meter hurdler, jumper coach, they tend to have a bit of a gym-based background. They then also will have a little bit of information because of that on basics of nutrition and hydration. So they then are passing those on to juniors that then do that, that would then kind of learn those skills to pick those things up as we move forward. And I think Jamie highlighted it. Golf as a sport, typically over the last kind of couple, is only just starting to become a true athletic sport. And you're starting to see that in the pros. And ultimately, it's like everything. Rugby, for example, in the 90s, when it went professional, went from an amateur sport where there was blokes in kind of big cotton t-shirts running around on a weekend to a massive professional sport. It's taken kind of 10, 12, 15 years or so. And I think golf is in that kind of window at the moment that rugby maybe was in the late 90s, where we're going to start to see that kind of picking up. However, it's massively reliant on funding. So it's kind of hoping that kind of UK sport are able to fund things like England Golf to allow them to do that, because I know there was a change at England Golf in the amount of kind of like the regions and the amount of support that has happened. So there's not as many people to support the players now at that elite end, and I don't know how much contact time they get as well, which is a bit of a shame.
Well, I think what you tend to find is that in golf it's a little bit different to other sports, because I know my little one is in a football academy and he's only 9, and that age group have their own physiotherapist. Yeah. Right. So if anybody gets injured, they look after him. They go through rehab if they need it.
Yeah.
They have a coordination trainer, right, who comes from the university to look at what they do and strength and conditioning. And periodically they're all tested against height, weight, length of limbs, power, speed, right? They're tested on absolutely everything. And then, they are then assessed in game as well as in training. They have a structured program run through the internet and the football club, where they have to report on how they've played. They mark themselves, the coaches mark them, and that becomes a documented history of how many games they've played, how much training they've done, right, over the time that they're there. But the moment they sign on at the club, they're almost the club's property, you could say, right? But anything that goes on is funded by the club, right? So if a young golfer comes in at 7 years old, 8 years, 9 years old, let's say, because that's the age they'd sign them up, and they turn up at the golf club, well, I'll tell you one thing, they will be paying right, for what they require. Now, if you're a 9-year-old golfer and you got talent and you have aspirations of playing, how much training should they be doing on a weekly basis, going from, 9 to 12 years old? What would be a realistic, bearing in mind, if you take away the logistics of travel and everything, let's imagine it's like a football club. They all come to train, right? How much training would a 9-year-old do in a week in order to achieve a certain level?
I think there's a massive thing there, because if we look at this is where football is a little different because of the funding. Like you say, if we had the ideal situation, you'd be able to kind of you'd be able to put a fair old bit of time into them. But I think if we look at DJ as an example, Speed, JT, again naming Americans, but they all played multi-sport as a kid, and they played right to quite a high level. Like I know DJ played basketball quite a lot at college as well as golf, and I think that's probably the one thing that we do sometimes miss in that multi-sport kind of thing. So the football academy, they're going to be able to have they've got their own conditioner who can in effect make up for that, because they will get them doing skills and games that you would pick up from other sports. Teaching, if let's say a junior golfer could go to an athletics club and learn to run, they might go and play basketball because they'll go and learn to jump and move around as well as their golf swing, which are all going to be key skills that they need to be able to do. The fortunate thing in football is they've got the funding there to have somebody there to do that without. So I think it's trying to get that balance right. It's not I don't know if I'd be able to give a quantified right X amount of hours a week, if that makes sense.
Jamie
Because again, it's going to be massively
Sadlowski.
down to the individual.
Jamie Sadlowski trained in hockey.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if it's not. He said hockey. I don't normal hockey or ice hockey. Different.
So, yeah, I would have thought it'd be ice hockey. Is he American or Canadian?
I think
I'll be
he's
honest, I don't
Canadian.
know. So if it's Canadian, it'll be ice hockey. Like I say, my gut is he's Canadian. I'm sure somebody that's watching might be able to kind of correct me if we're wrong. Yeah, if he's Canadian, it will definitely be ice hockey. And again, you look at his stature and his limb length, he'd fit on the ice perfectly. He's a man mountain.
Oh, he said to me, I did no training. I just played hockey.
Yeah.
But he said you need to be an athlete. You have to be an athlete before you're a golfer. You know what I mean? Ali,
yeah,
ice hockey.
yeah. I'm going to say Ali's given us the yeah. So I mean, yeah, you look at ice hockey as a sport. It's basically rugby on the ice with a puck, isn't it? Their ability to change direction and rough it, ultimately, all those skills that you want that you get across multiple sports, he's done there on the ice. Which then, and also it's a massively rotation based, using the ground, correct timing, which then hence why it kind of fits in, especially for him, into the long drive when he originally did that before moving into playing like competitive 18 hole.
Now, if we go, let's base this then. We're in long drive at the moment.
Yeah.
Power, speed, right? And we're moving into an area of 130 mile an hour.
Yeah.
Right? That's what they're gonna be producing now. Even if it's not playing speed, they're gonna get high up there, right?
Yeah.
Jamie Sadlowski, if you look at what he did, moved up and down massively in order to produce lots of speed.
Yep.
Justin Thomas.
Yeah.
Like Terry Rowell said last night, stayed almost left, jumped up through the roof, speed and power. So Justin Thomas and alike models, all their speed has come from this upward surge, right?
Yeah.
So there's no, let's say, side to side in it. It's all up and turn.
Yeah.
Like leap into the air, jumping. Now, if you had, let's say this is going to be a completely different style of player now. So you have a player who loads more into the right foot.
Yeah.
Right? And then centers themselves and rotates. So they have a little bit of side to side and rotation, but they don't jump. Right? So they don't have this. You have to actually. I'm trying to record something as well at the same time from that, and it's all gone peaked on. So instead of being a jumper, they side to side and rotate, right? So the component of the vertical component in that swing is almost minimal.
Yeah.
How would you change their training?
So I think relatively simple. So somebody like JT or Jamie is going to be much more kind of squat based and vertical jumping and those kind of bits and pieces. Whereas the person that, dare I say, is probably going to be more like a rugby scum pass would probably be the best way I kind of describe it. So we would probably be looking at, so it's that a little bit lower, slightly squat and much more rotation kind of base. That would probably be, yes, we'd still need to kind of squat and get super strong because we're not getting quite as high in that vertical element, but it's probably going to be much more kind of med ball rotations and throwing against the wall, maybe more lateral squatting rather than vertical based patterns, and maybe like a rotational jump, but it would be like almost like a broad jump forward, but it'd be rotating and jumping to the side, if that makes sense, rather than it being more vertical.
I can see this being quite a major difference from player to player.
Yeah.
Because and Dr. Scott Lynn talked about it last week in the fact that traces were different. Terry Rouse talked about it massively last night, and his data you know, to a degree, stacked up with what they were doing when they were tested, right? But if we are all individual and we produce power in a different way, then we are all going to require different training programs, aren't we?
Yeah, massively, and that's about learning. That's about learning learning the athlete, learning their training plan, learning their kind of their philosophies. I suppose is the best way about how they swing a club, which is kind of, I know you alluded to the kind of 3-hour screening. That's why I kind of try and spend time with somebody, because yes, you could do it in half an hour. Well, you couldn't, but you could spend a lot less time with somebody, but then you don't really get to know them, and therefore the training plan you're going to put in place is going to be suboptimal. Therefore, you're not going to get the results that they're after, or they require, if that makes sense. I would love to be able to look at kind of force traces and those kind of bits and pieces, looking at comparing that more vertical or more rotational, and seeing almost whether you could tweak the almost kind of combine the two. So could we kind of merge the two? Would that almost, if we've got those two at either end of the spectrums, could we merge the two and get create even more club head speed? Or not necessarily club head speed, but more force at the club?
Well, I think what you've got is, I think you've got this stable of players who have a lot of vertical component to what they do and produce high speeds, right?
Yeah.
But I think you've also got the golfer who's different build and is more rotational, who doesn't have that vertical component in it.
Yeah,
who probably plays a different game in a lot of ways.
You look at JT and Jamie. Okay, Jamie's taller than JT from what I know of the pair of them, but they're relatively they're slender in build, if that makes sense. Whereas you look at somebody like, I don't know, let's use I mean, he's a local lad to us in Birmingham, Jordan Brooks, who's a long driver, who, watching his swing, he's much more kind of movement laterally, if that makes sense, from what I've seen of his video swing, from his swing, sorry. So he would kind of be in that kind of element, and whether actually he's very tall, could we give him more vertical? Would that help him, or would that, like you say, would that hinder him, if that makes sense? That's kind of a discussion.
I think at the end of the day, each of these players is one, producing speed and power, and two, is controlling the club face, so they know where the ball's going.
Yeah.
Now, if I can jump up into the air and release the club and hit 300 yards and know where it's going, perfect. I'm going to train jumping, squatting, everything to strengthen me in this plane of motion, aren't I? And if I'm then a slightly different player where different build, but I'm more rotational and I'm not jumping, so I've got this this sort of lateral component with this rotational component, but I've not got a lot of vertical. Right, I could potentially still hit a long way, but I could be controlling the face, right, through rotation of my body. Now, if that's how I play and I use rotation square to face and I'm jumping, right, I could lose my skill, couldn't I? You know what I mean? And then you know, you could almost say I'd be better off training like the hockey player.
And again, like Shannon said, that's the discussion with the player. I think ultimately, you can do a bit of general training, if that makes sense, i.e. try and improve their vertical component, but they might not use it. So that, again, it's kind of that one of, you wouldn't, not necessarily kind of going down that rabbit hole and actually just going completely after the one and ignoring the other. I think there would be some warrant and merit in kind of including both in there, if that makes sense. Even somebody who does stay left side, rotate centrally, and then rather than kind of really shifting onto that right foot, adding some element of rotation, but it might be a bit more of a static rotation. Whereas the person who does get that big step left, well, movement right and then movement left, they might be in more of a kind of step throw med ball. So again, it's both a rotational med ball element, but actually there's a slight tweak in how they do it because that's specific for them.
And I think done well, that'd be a conversation with a profile. You'd obviously look at the body at physical, so you'd have a physical screening on the body, and then the way this is in this day and age now, you can literally get whoever's in the team, whether that be player, parent, coach, psych, count. Well, you can just talk on Zoom and go, look, this is what he does. This is what we need to achieve.
Yeah, totally. So a lot of players that I tend to work with, it goes out to the player and it's their control. But we set up a joint WhatsApp group between players, and you kind of you have their staff, their group of coaches on there, if that makes sense. So say for example, we have an S&C, and Coach Now is another obviously online version of that, if that makes sense. I think WhatsApp's free and it works, so it's kind of one of those, if that makes sense. I know Coach Now is great, and I know England Golf use it, and other coaches using it, and I'm not knocking it. But ultimately, you're paying $200-300 a year for a license, when actually, WhatsApp works from that point of view, and the thing is, it's pretty bloody good.
I don't think it matters what you use, as long as you do it, as long as it's done the right way.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and I think that's the way. Again, going more athletic and becoming more of an athletic sport. Again, we use your son in the football. That's exactly how it works in football. The difference is they're at a club where they'll be sitting down probably once a week as a coaching staff and going, right, guys, here's our player list. Right, let's talk about them. Okay, let's use. I'm going to pick on Seb because he's just put thumbs up. He's a client, somebody I work with. Right, we're going to discuss Seb today and X, Y, and Z, if that makes sense. I won't obviously go into any details, but you then as a staff, right, okay, well, what's he doing well? What's he not doing well? How do we move forward with that? Oh, okay, right, he needs some more S&C. Ray, you're going to go and work with him. Right, coach, actually, he doesn't do these things technically very well. Right, we need to work on some specifics with that. So it's done in every other sport. You kind of, again, athletics, that would be the same kind of thing from there. If you've got somebody on a group program, rugby is definitely netball from we get into kind of the Super League systems and those kind of things. And in the pro setup in golf, it's done as well. And at certain levels, it's just unfortunately not done. Partly because there aren't like coaches that I reach out to. Some of them don't really know who to work with, and also there is an element with some coaches that actually it's almost like, well, this is I feel from having spoken to some golf coaches that it's like, this is my player. I'm going to look after them. I know what they need to do, and it's kind of sometimes actually, again, I think as a sport, I think we need to move forward in certain aspects.
Jeff Smith last week, who's probably got X number of players on the PGA Tour, said, "I ask other coaches if I can't get the player to do it."
Yeah, and
he said, "I'm not scared of asking whoever if they've got a way of solving that problem."
Yeah.
Because it's player-centred, not coach-centred.
Yeah, and hopefully that player is going to go, right, okay, well, they're going to respect that and go, right, okay, let's move forward, if that makes sense. And it's diving out to other experts, because you get one player, you might not be able to communicate the one thing you need to get through to them in the way that needs to be, and it might just need sometimes another person just to say one thing, like, hang on, that's what you've been saying for the last 3-4 sessions. Right, great. Now we can move on.
Absolutely, and I'm sure it'll change. With time, because everything filters down from the top. So the more open-minded and things they are at the top, the more it'll filter down the tree. And the thing is, at the end of the day, the key is to improve the player.
Yeah.
It's not a personal thing. It's not about a coach. It's just about the player getting better. So you have to give them the tools required to do the job. And I have a theory with my little one, right?
Yeah.
And that is that it doesn't matter how good you are, right? You could not actually say you will be a Premier League footballer. You can't. You can't say he will make it because you don't know what's going to happen. Don't know what's going to happen, right? You don't know whether they keep him, etc. But I know one thing: he'll never be any good if you don't give him the tools to do the job. So, you know, if you give them the tools to the job and you give them the right guidance, the right time, then they can keep progressing and you keep climbing, right? And at some point, and I've seen it hundreds of times with it, at points, players bow out for whatever reason. They're not good enough, run out of money, you know, life takes a different role, they get injured, right? At some point, things change, and they do, right? But it's different if they bow out and go, you know, I did everything. I had everything. I had it all right. I had it set up properly. I did, you know. Or you get so far and go, I should have done that when I was younger.
I was going to say, unfortunately, you get that. Yeah, I think, you ultimately you bang on the nail there. Is ultimately all we can do as coaches and support staff is guide the player, nudge them in the right direction, and give an honest opinion and kind of go, right, this is what we need to do because of X, Y, and Z. Have a good, strong rationale. Have a group of coaches worked around and kind of a bit of a plan moving forward to kind of go, right, well, this is where we're going, rather than almost blindly kind of trying to stab in the dark and kind of, right, okay, well, this is what I need to do today. This is what I want to do tomorrow, and actually have a plan in place, have a routine, have a bit of a, right, well, this is what we're going to do.
So, I'm inside. What should they be doing? So, what should the average player be doing? Bearing in mind they've got probably another 3 weeks of this.
Yeah.
Maybe golf might open at some point, but you know, what should somebody be doing now?
So I think it's brilliant to see kind of on Instagram the amount of people that I've invested in nets have nipped the spare duvet off the sheet and kind of done that. So they're practicing their golf swing ultimately, which is brilliant from a technical point of view. But again, we go back to the point of what happens with most golfers is they get from the car, go and grab a coffee from the pro shop, play their ticket, and then get onto the first tee.
Let me tell you something, right?
Yeah.
Gary Player today, when he rang me, said,
"Oh no,
they eat too much sausage and bacon in the UK. That's why they're not athletes."
Yeah, well, I was going to say, I've kind of highlighted that one already. So I think if you're getting somebody who's going out and hitting golf balls and practicing it on the net, in a net at home, practicing their swing, trying to make technical improvements, but it's about trying to firstly get the body ready for that. Again, warming up, getting some movement done. So that would be first and foremost. So if you've got to swing a golf club at some relative force and speed, you need to get your body prepared for it. That's both mentally and physically. So physically, have you done some rotational work to get you into the positions you need to? Have you kind of got your body warm, physically warm, got the muscles kind of ready to good to go? Secondly, kind of have you got your brain? Have you got yourself mentally switched on? Do you know what you're going to do? Is it just a case of you just got to go and practice, or you actually going to go and train? And there's a very little difference between that and the fact that, well, if we're just practicing, you're doing anything, it's not really guided. Actually, we're there to train, we're there to make improvements, and we have a bit of a set plan. So first and foremost, it's doing some movement stuff before you kind of swing a golf club. There are loads of kind of home workouts and bits and pieces that you could be doing, so we can still be getting stronger, which is the next bit, is trying to get stronger at home, and that can be done through some simple things. So a client I was on a Zoom session or a WhatsApp kind of video session earlier, he hasn't got any access to any gym kit at the moment. He's literally got a rucksack full of textbooks and a couple of heavy big bottles of water. We're still squatting, we're still RDLing, we're still bent over rowing. We're then doing some side work, and he's getting a sweat on, and he's still getting stronger. Yes, it's not 100 kilos on his back like he normally can do, but we can adapt the amount of time he takes and make it a little bit slower, add a little bit of a pause in to make it hard enough and still get those strength adaptations. So in theory, we could be doing everything we should be doing that a pro player will be doing, and at the moment, we've still got a bit, if anything, we've got a bit more time to be doing that, purely because, well, if we have an hour commute to work and back every day, we've no longer got that. I do appreciate, however, parents are homeschooling and there are other constraints on life as well, if that makes sense. But if you can find an hour to go and swing a golf club, well, I'm going to say to you, can I steal 5-10 minutes of that, and you spend 50 minutes swinging a golf club and 10 minutes of that warming up and getting ready? And I will probably argue that if you do that, you're going to have a much better outcome in 3 weeks' time than you are without.
I think the other side of that is, even outside lockdown, there's a key piece that if you get a player who plays either high level amateur or, let's say, second division professional, right? They ain't going to have a hotel with a gym in it.
No.
Right? You know, you're not on the journey to the Premier League, right? You don't play at Wembley, right? You play at some court, some field in the middle of nowhere, right?
Yeah.
Where it's not flat and it's right. So as you develop through sport, right? And I used to work directly with a physiotherapist, and he always said, the problem with the lower tours is there isn't going to be a gym. So their training needs to revolve in a way around things they can do at home or in a hotel room. Because that's where they're going to be doing it 9 times out of 10.
And it's simple things. So, I mean, gym kit's worth its weight in gold at the moment. It's ridiculous out there, but there's still bits of kit that you could buy, such as power bands. So they're kind of basically big, thick, elastic bands that you can then hold on to. You could row, again, we could go back down to basic patterns. You can row with, you can press with, you can pull with, all the things you need to do in a hotel room or at home at the moment to make progress and steps forward, if that makes sense. There is no difference, like you say, between a hotel gym session and a home gym session. And those bits of kit, you're probably going to spend, I don't know, 40, 50 quid in total by the time you've bought. So I say to all the golfers I work with, I want them to have what I call their golfer's first aid kit, which is ultimately a foam roller, a soft ball or spiky massage ball, depending on who you speak to, a mini band and a couple of power bands. And ultimately, if you've got those 5-6 bits of kit, without seeing me or a physio in real life, because again, that's the other thing, they don't have access to gyms, but they don't have access to therapy on the mini tours. It's not like you've got a sports therapist there that you can just rock up to and they can crack you and whack you. So actually, these are the bits of kit you need to be able to kind of mean that one day you walk off a course not playing very well, but the next morning on day 2, actually I can put an intervention in place to actually mean that you can swing your golf club and hopefully on the smaller tours still win some money. If it's playing at your club champs, which typically in the UK over 2 days, it's waking up on the Sunday and still being able to play in the second day of the club champs for an amateur.
Absolutely. I think, you know, and it's an education, because this could be how you train for the next X amount of time. And it might be an option of how you train in a long term when you're not at home, you know, because you could be on the road going from one place to another, and how you train in your home now could be what you do when you're, you know, moving around. Yeah,
totally. And that's the thing, like if when we get out of this and gyms are open and stuff like that, especially for the players and stuff, having a relatively winter block or pre-season and getting stronger, that then really allows them to be able to go, well, actually, you know, once or twice a week I can get away with doing some of the slightly lower stuff. And then it's also about kind of adding velocity into it, whether it be horizontal or vertical, getting somebody jumping, getting somebody moving, and trying to have intent. That's the big thing about kind of speed sticks, whether it be whichever brand you purchase, or, as I kind of openly say, an empty driver shaft. Most of us have got adjustable drivers, whip the head off, and you've got your own light speed stick there for free.
I'm going to speak to them. I'm going to speak to them in the next week.
Oh yeah, okay.
I've had him online, the guy from Speed Sticks in America. Because
cool.
It'd be interesting not just to know, I want to know the theory behind them.
Yeah.
And how you use them properly and things to
so
what you create. Because I just see them in players' bags, I do. And they go, oh yeah, they make me hit it. And I go, well, how's that work then? And they go, I don't know.
So there's I can't think. Well, I mean, ultimately, so snippet for that. If you look at any of the sport, if you look at say rugby, football, athletics, and you get somebody, a sprinter, say for example, they will do over and under speed work, i.e. a sprinter will do over speed work where they'll have a big elastic band and the coach will stand at the end line and it basically pulls them quicker. They have to therefore turn over quicker and it gets the body firing quicker, simplistic terms. Or you have under speed work, which is where you put a parachute on and it makes you work harder. Now, the big thing for me personally as an S&C coach, I want to see quality movement. Now, you look at sprinters or rugby players or footballers who do that, they run well in the first place.
Yeah.
They're not doing it on a compromised system. It's not like they're trying to drive a Porsche with a flat tire. For me, golfers, my big caveat for super speed sticks, and this isn't a knock because they are great bits of kit, it's how you incorporate them into training and not, as with golf, unfortunately, I'll get off my soapbox in a minute, it's right, here's the one thing that's going to fix your golf. Do you know what? This is the one thing you need and you're going to hit it 130 mile an hour club head speed. Well, hang on, he's 70 years old. Yeah. He can't touch his toes and he can't turn over his left shoulder. How about we incorporate some, and Super Speed do some warm-up stuff in their programs and stuff like that. But as a generalization in the sport, we're very good at selling that product and going, this is what we're fixing. Yes, it will give you more speed because it's simple in how it's worked. It's very clever and the body is very clever. But my argument is how much further, how much faster could we do if we incorporate some good quality T-spine mobility, some glute movement and stuff like that.
Anyway, right, we're on 49 seconds. Kicked me off after an hour. I'm going to ring him and tell him I need longer, man.
I was going to say, get me back on.
3 hours I'd have been on last night.
I don't know.
But, mate, it's class. Love speaking
Pleasure.
to you. Very informative, as always.
Cheers, dude. I'll drop you a message.
Thanks, buddy. I'll catch you soon. See you, buddy.
See you later.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.